Hi, I'm Joe Connolly. To introduce you to Scott Rechler, CEO and Chairman of RXR Realty, the owner of many of the largest office towers in New York City and the suburbs. Nobody has better knowledge of how work and business are now about to change than Scott Rechler. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Joe, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
What percentage of office workers do you believe, based on what you're hearing from your tenants, will come back to the city?
So we've been averaging at about 10%, but I would say that ever since President Biden made the announcement that people will be able to be vaccinated by July 4th, most of our companies have said they're coming back to the city. So we're starting to see people start coming back in June. And I would say by Labor Day, we'll have all of our companies back in our buildings, maybe not at 100% capacity, maybe with some hybrid work, but they'll be back and starting to explore the new normal and fully engaged.
And that hybrid, though, as I understand what a lot of business owners are saying, especially in Manhattan, will create maybe a 40 or 50% reduction in total foot traffic over the week, which will have a big impact, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably more like 20% of foot traffic, because what we're hearing is there's some percentage of the workforce, let's call it 10 to 15%, that's going to be in full-time. There's another 10 to 15% that could work remotely. And then the balance may not be in 1 day a week, where they may work remotely for that 1 day. But so it's clearly going to be some difference, which means we're going to have to reimagine, what our downtowns are like to have less traffic on a day-to-day basis.
I read that you said someplace that the relationship between the city and the suburbs is about to change. How so?
Yeah, I think there's a realization that there's an interconnected ecosystem, both within in our city and within our region. And if you look historically, there's been moments in time where the city had urban flight and people went to the suburbs, and then people in the last number of decades were coming to the city. I think this time there's going to be much more of a interconnected expansion, and that you'll have more people that might be working in satellite offices or remotely in the suburbs, have a quality of life that's more affordable, more open space, but then be able to come to the city when they want to be in the city and interconnect with these companies. So in this recovery, I would expect that both the city and the suburbs to recover collectively.
So it sounds like you see the possibility of a win-win for the suburbs and the city, or does that go too far?
No, I do think that it could be a win-win. I think we have to realize that coming out of this pandemic, that what existed in the past is not going to be what existed in the future. And we need to start reimagining a post-pandemic playbook, both on a public policy standpoint, as a private sector, a business person, big business and small business, to address that. And when you think about as people start to grow their businesses on a moving forward basis, they got to look towards where can they get their workforce, that talent that lives in the suburbs, that then can come to the city, and that's some that work in the suburbs and live in the suburbs. And so it's reimagining that for the future.
One more question before we get to producer Neil A. Carousso. Will some office towers really be converted to apartments?
Yeah, so I think one of the byproducts of COVID is there's been this flight to quality, and it's been an accelerant for so many different things. We had 10 years of innovation in 10 months. And so that's been some good things. And then there's been some things that were already becoming less competitive, have accelerated that lack of competitive. So there's some office buildings, and there's frankly some retail buildings and hotels that just will not be competitive in a post-COVID world. And so the right thing to do in that instance is to convert them to multifamily. The other benefit of that is if we have less people in our CBDs, as you noted before, because they may be not in the office as much.
Central Business District.
Central Business District, right? This will enable these communities to thrive by having more people not just work there, but live there. And we have a great example. Look what happened in Lower Manhattan post 9/11, right? We intentionally said we're going to make this a 24/7 live, work, and play community. And that's how it's been rebuilt. So it's now not just a 9 to 5 people coming in on the train and leaving. It's active, it's alive, it's energized. And that's what New York's all about. And so we're going to have to get through that process in Midtown as well.
Some of these buildings on the side streets might make cool low-rise office buildings or townhouses or apartments on the side streets.
Absolutely, or in either low-rise office buildings or just full conversions into new multifamily buildings. And if you think about it, one of our challenges in New York City has been affordability of housing. So if we can add more supply by taking office buildings or hotels or retail that's no longer competitive and replacing it with housing, we're going to actually be able to help support our housing markets by creating a lower cost of housing.
Neil.
So Scott, permit leases recently hit a monthly record. I'm wondering, as people return to the offices, will that be seen in the commercial real estate market? What do you think?
Yeah, great point, Neil. And really the leading indicator to recovery for New York City is the talent pool, right? What drives New York City's economy is people, the best and brightest from around the world, want to come live here and work here. And what we've seen since the beginning of this year is record levels of leasing of apartments and for sale housing in New York City, which is, again, gives me confidence that people believe in the future of New York. They're coming here, they're renting because they plan to work here. And if they're here, the big companies that want to attract that talent and bring that talent in to grow their businesses are going to be here as well. So it's a great leading indicator as to what's to come.
Scott, you're also the chairman of the Regional Plan Association. How do you see the Tri-State in being competitive in this post-pandemic economy?
Yeah, this is the key for the Tri-State region is having that quality of life that attracts that talent. And so we need to make sure that we are providing the lifestyle, the infrastructure, the public safety, the level of restaurants and small businesses and character and diversity that is New York. And we have to do that at a price that people can afford. And so I think that is what's going to be competitive. And that's what's made us competitive historically, right? I mean, after 9/11, after Superstorm Sandy, after the great financial crisis, people have written off the obituaries and say people are going to leave New York, and people come back to New York because of that excitement, that quality of life. But we can't take it for granted. We have to invest in our small businesses. We have to invest in that diversity, and we have to be careful that we don't overtax people, that the cost to live here is too great versus the benefits of living here.
Jim.
Early in the pandemic, I heard a lot of talk about satellite office buildings in the suburbs, which you referenced a few minutes ago. But I've heard almost nothing about satellite locations other than people working from home or at a WeWork type of a place. I haven't heard of large office park developments of satellite locations. Is that so, or is that in the works, or what?
Yeah, Joe, it's a good point. It started where many companies were thinking about, do we start opening satellite offices that are closer to home? But then they quickly realized that they need to bring people back to the workplace, right? This is about bringing people back so they can build culture, they can have mentorship, collaboration, a sense of community, and create that corporate value set that makes their team members feel part of something bigger. And you're not going to get that if everyone's in different satellite offices. So I think the pivot has been more about remote work. And if you're working remotely, you may work from home, or you might work in a flexible office space that is close to your home, so you don't need to come into the office. And even we're building now multifamily properties that actually have as an amenity flexible office spaces that our residents can actually rent for the day, or meeting spaces they can rent for the day versus actually coming into the city.
Have you changed the interiors of many of your high-rise towers in Manhattan?
So, we haven't changed the interiors specifically, but, we're as you focus on this flight to quality, what attracts people to not work from home and come to the office? It's that sense of energy, it's light and air. It's a focus on being comfortable, that their health and wellness is being considered, which means you need to have the right infrastructure in place to assure that. You want to have close proximity to public transportation, and you want to be in a community that outside the building is energizing, right? It's something that you feel good about being part of. You go to that local restaurant, you go to that local store, there's people on the streets. That's what's going to drive people there. And so we've been focusing on making sure that our buildings are magnetic, right? Magnetically bringing people to want to come to the workplace, to want to be part of returning to the city. And the fortunate thing is most of our buildings are Class A, well located around Grand Central, subway stops, Times Square, a lot of activity and a lot of energy. But it's the Class B, more commodity buildings that we referenced earlier that I think are going to be challenged to be able to adapt to this new normal in this post-COVID environment.
Are people actually going to work from home part-time, or even some people working from home long-term?
So, the genie's out of the bottle that we've learned that we can actually work remotely using video conferencing. So the goal needs to be now, how do we get the best of working in the workplace with your peers and building values and culture and collaboration? And how do we use the benefits of remote work selectively to create a better quality of life? So you don't necessarily need to make that commute, or you can live a little bit further away from the city, or if you have something going on with your family, you can work from home, or if you're not feeling great, you can work from home. So every company that I'm speaking to is trying to figure out what that's going to be. Everyone has a hypothesis. No one is certain of what the outcome is going to be. So my sense is that people are going to bring people back based on what they believe is the right approach, set some new policies, and then they're going to monitor it for the next 12 months or so, and then they'll start adjusting as to what's really working and what's not working. And it's going to depend on the job, right? If you're working in a call center, you can work remotely because most of the work you're doing is online, can be monitored online. You don't have that much collaboration. But if you're a salesperson or a manager, if you're trying to ideate with new concepts, you need to be in the office. A great way to think about remote work is you can play defense if you're working remotely. As a company, you cannot play offense working remotely. And that's something we've seen over the last number of months with all of our clients. And that's why they're keen on getting people back to the workplace, because they need to play offense to grow their companies at this time.
About the subway, it gets so discouraging to hear the news recently. What do you think should be done? Do you think the city will get back control of the crime and other problems in the subway?
So, the subway situation obviously is critical, right? Because to really bring the city back, we're a city that's based on a vibrant 24/7 public transit system, and the subway is that lifeline. I think the answer is we need more police presence down in the subway. The good news is the city, I think, just recently increased it by about 10%, and we need more people, and that's on the subway and our streets, right? It's challenging to actually not have to avoid and the crime and have public safety if you don't have people on the streets, people in the subway. So the more people come back, the more police presence there are in the critical areas. I think that will work itself through as we go forward. And probably the last piece I'll just say is there are people that have mental illness, right? That and then as we've had to deal with moving people out of our homeless shelters that need help. And so I think we need to also focus about providing those people with help, getting them off the street and out of the subways where they can get that help.
And all these issues are intertwined. I mean, it really impacts those business districts. I wonder, how do you, what would you advise a small business owner on a brick and mortar plan? They're looking to expand their retail shop. What would you advise them?
Well, first, I would say, don't be a prisoner of the past. Be a pioneer of the future. Don't try to think about what you did in the past. Think about how you're now going to be able to outperform in this post-COVID world. And you got to give a lot of the small business owners a tremendous amount of credit for their innovation, their entrepreneurship to actually make it through COVID. And you think about how many have moved on the restaurant side, outside dining, or the small shops in terms of bringing their products online, or creating new ways to attract customers and products. So I think we need to continue to be more innovative and recognize that there's going to be a new way of doing business as we go forward. And I think we as a public have a civic responsibility to support them, right? We should be shopping locally. We should be dining in our neighborhood restaurants, and we should be supporting our local businesses as we go forward, and take it as a civic responsibility. Just, this is something, if New York's going to come back, we all got to be behind it. And New York's not New York without a thriving small business community and the diversity and character that comes with it.
Yeah, when you see the old photos of the 80s or 90s, you see all these local shops. It looks so different from now, and you realize that's how I think of New York, with the multiplicity of these local businesses. My last question about the tech industries. Sometimes it seems, Scott, like the tech companies are operating in an economy of their own. What is the situation, as you know it, with the strength and future of the technology companies?
Yeah, so, one of New York's greatest advantages is that we are the beacon for knowledge-based companies, right? If you're a knowledge-based company, whether that's tech, whether that's pharmaceutical, life sciences, or financial, the ingredient that enables your business to thrive is talent, right? That's the most important resource, and we're that place that has that talent. And so when you look around the rest of North America, frankly, there's no other place in the world like New York City that has the depth, has the diversity of talent and expertise that we have. And so as I speak to tech execs, as I speak to pharma execs, as I speak to life sciences or financial service firms, they realize that their growth is predicated on having a major presence in New York. And one of the things we watch carefully in the beginning of the pandemic is, what were these companies doing? The ones that were making big commitments, were they sticking to those commitments? And the answer is yes. Pfizer, Google, Disney, Amazon, they're all growing. JP Morgan, they're building big campuses in New York City, and they plan on growing here for decades to come. So while we've had a challenge through getting through COVID, now that the vaccinations are coming out, the streets are coming back alive, the restaurants are reopening, we have, the Broadway is going to reopen. I just think New York's going to come back better and stronger. That being said, I think we also need to make sure that we pay attention to the small businesses and those that may have not participated in this big upswing, to make sure they have the benefit to be part of this economic rebound that we're going to have.
I'm sorry, I do have to ask you one more. Real estate prices, home prices in the suburbs, have they peaked? Are they going to come down? What is the outlook there for people who want to buy?
There's been a shortage of home development for decades around this country, right? And the suburbs in particular, had been actually seeing declines for quite some period of time. And so there is now this new demand, but there's not a lot of new supply. So I would expect to see still strong home prices in the suburbs. Maybe not the spike we've seen during COVID, but I think that there is more of a desire for people to have homes in the suburbs, and are now actively in that marketplace. And we've seen in the projects that we have in our suburban communities tremendous demand. Now, not everything is the same, right? I think we still are seeing a demand even in the suburbs, what I call suburban downtowns, or live sort of lifestyle type places where you can have the fully serviced type lifestyle locations that are sort of a mix of what you would get in the city, but also get the benefits of being in the suburbs.
Scott, thank you for your insights into how we are going to live and work. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Neil. I appreciate it.